Your soulmate's big news will leave you in tears. Are you ready to hear it? Red heart sparkles. Don't skip. Listen carefully. The morning arrived quietly, just as countless mornings had before. Golden rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains and gently filled the room with warmth. A cool breeze drifted through the open window carrying the scent of fresh rain, blooming flowers, and the promise of another ordinary day. Birds greeted the sunrise with cheerful songs. The neighborhood bakery opened before dawn, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of warm bread. Children hurried toward school with joyful laughter echoing through the air. Neighbors smiled as they watered gardens and greeted one another. Everything looked exactly the same. Nothing suggested that before the sun would set, someone would make a decision that would quietly change the direction of their heart forever. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest turning points often begin in the most ordinary moments. For many years, they believed that important conversations could always wait until tomorrow. Tomorrow would be less complicated. Tomorrow would feel less uncomfortable. Tomorrow would surely be the perfect moment. But tomorrow kept moving. Days quietly became weeks. Weeks became months. Months slowly became years. During that time, gratitude often remained unspoken. Apologies stayed locked inside. Encouraging words were delayed. Feelings remained hidden behind polite smiles. One ordinary morning, while watching sunlight dance across the kitchen floor, they quietly admitted something to themselves. Maybe waiting has never protected my heart. Maybe it has only delayed healing. Because your heart needs this right now, because silence often becomes heavier than truth spoken with kindness. They prepared a simple breakfast. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window. Instead of reaching immediately for their phone, they simply watched life unfold outside. Across the street, a father patiently tied his little daughter's shoes before school. An elderly woman smiled while feeding birds outside her home. A delivery driver paused to help someone carry a heavy box. None of these people expected applause. They simply chose kindness. Watching those small moments reminded them that love is rarely revealed through dramatic speeches. It is revealed through ordinary actions repeated faithfully over time. Because your heart needs this right now, because genuine love grows through everyday acts of care. After breakfast, they walked toward an old bookshelf in the corner of the room. Resting there was a notebook that had traveled beside them through many seasons of life. Its cover had faded. Its pages had softened with age. Inside were dreams once written with excitement. Questions recorded during lonely nights. Lessons learned after painful experiences. Prayers whispered when no one else could hear. Gratitude written after quiet victories. Turning each page felt like meeting earlier versions of themselves. The frightened version. The impatient version. The hopeful version. The version learning that courage is often quieter than fear. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth is built one honest day at a time. They opened to a fresh page. The room became still. For several moments they simply looked at the blank paper. Finally they wrote. If today became my only opportunity. They stopped writing. Their heart beat a little faster. Another sentence slowly appeared. What would I regret leaving unsaid? Reading those words stirred something deep inside. For the first time, they realized the question wasn't about finding perfect words. It was about finding enough courage to speak sincere ones. Because your heart needs this right now, because honesty often begins with one simple question. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park where they often found peace. Towering oak trees stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes moved softly through the branches. The calm lake reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Children chased butterflies through colorful gardens. Families spread blankets beneath the shade. Everything invited them to slow down. They found the same wooden bench overlooking the water. Instead of searching for dramatic answers, they simply watched life continue. Because your heart needs this right now, because peaceful hearts often discover wisdom busy minds overlook. Nearby, a young boy struggled to build a small kite with his grandfather. One corner refused to stay together. The child sighed. "I keep getting it wrong." The grandfather smiled warmly. "No. You're learning something every time you try." The boy looked uncertain. The grandfather gently continued. "Success doesn't come because nothing goes wrong. It comes because you don't stop." Those simple words quietly settled into their heart. Perhaps relationships worked the same way. Perhaps meaningful conversations didn't need perfection. Perhaps they simply required sincerity. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting relationships are strengthened through patience rather than perfection. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed an elderly woman sitting beneath a flowering tree with a small journal resting in her lap. She smiled kindly. Curious, they greeted her. After a few moments of quiet conversation, she softly said, "I've discovered something after many years." "What is it?" they asked. She looked toward the calm water. "The words we delay often become heavier than the words we finally speak." Those simple words remained with them long after they continued walking. Because your heart needs this right now, because carrying unspoken gratitude, forgiveness, or encouragement becomes a burden no heart was meant to carry forever. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, lavender, and daisies bloomed beneath the afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully removed tiny weeds growing between healthy flowers. Curious, they asked, "Why remove them while they're still so small?" The gardener smiled gently. Because little problems become much harder to solve when ignored. Those words echoed deeply. Misunderstandings begin small. Distance begins quietly. Silence grows gradually. Honest conversations often prevent those small things from becoming larger. Because your heart needs this right now, because healthy relationships require continual care. The afternoon breeze carried soft piano music from a nearby community center. Only a handful of people stopped to listen. Still, every melody was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely ask for attention. Integrity works quietly. Compassion works quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Hope grows quietly. Yet together they quietly transform lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest influences often arrive gently. Returning to the familiar wooden bench, they opened the notebook once again. Today's page filled naturally. Today I realized something important. The big news wasn't hidden inside a dramatic event. It began inside one quiet decision. The decision to stop allowing fear to control my voice. The decision to appreciate people while I still have the opportunity. The decision to forgive more quickly. The decision to speak honestly with kindness. Reading those words brought unexpected peace. Not because every challenge had disappeared, but because they finally knew the direction they wanted their life to follow. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often begins when our actions match our values. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected on the title of this story. Your soulmate's big news will leave you in tears. Are you ready to hear it? A gentle smile crossed their face. The big news had never been a prediction. It wasn't a hidden message from the future. It wasn't a supernatural revelation. The real news was far more meaningful. A heart that had lived in hesitation was finally choosing courage. A person who had waited for perfect timing was finally embracing the present. A life guided by fear was beginning to be guided by love, honesty, and hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest changes often begin inside us before anyone else can see them. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose honesty over hesitation. Tomorrow I will express gratitude without waiting for the perfect moment. Tomorrow I will listen before assuming. Tomorrow I will forgive more freely. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose words and actions reflect kindness, humility, compassion, and hope." Then they paused before writing one final reflection. Today I discovered that the greatest news a heart can receive is not about the future. It is the realization that every ordinary day gives us another opportunity to love more generously, speak more honestly, forgive more quickly, and appreciate the people around us while we still have the chance. Those simple choices quietly become the foundation of every meaningful relationship. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer feared the conversations waiting ahead. Because they had discovered that the greatest news wasn't something that happened to them. It was the quiet transformation taking place within their own heart. And listen to this. The next morning arrived wrapped in the same peaceful beauty that had greeted countless mornings before. Golden sunlight slowly spilled through the curtains, filling the room with warmth. A cool breeze drifted through the open window carrying the scent of fresh rain, blooming flowers, and the quiet promise of another new beginning. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood slowly awakened. The familiar bakery opened its doors before dawn, filling the street with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children hurried toward school, laughing with friends. Neighbors smiled while watering colorful gardens. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet inside one heart, everything felt completely different. Yesterday had planted a seed. Today that seed was beginning to grow. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting change often begins with one quiet decision. They prepared breakfast without rushing. A warm cup of tea rested beside the kitchen window. Instead of checking messages or becoming distracted by another busy day, they simply watched the morning unfold. Across the street, a young father patiently taught his daughter how to ride her bicycle. Each time she lost balance, she stood up smiling. He never criticized her. He simply said, "Try again." Those two simple words lingered. How many dreams had been saved because someone encouraged another person to try again? How many relationships had survived because someone refused to give up? Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement often changes lives more than perfection ever could. After breakfast they reached once again for the familiar notebook. Its worn cover reflected years of faithful use. Inside were dreams once thought impossible. Questions that had slowly found answers. Moments of disappointment. Quiet victories. Prayers whispered during lonely nights. Gratitude written after ordinary mornings. Turning each page reminded them how much they had grown. Not all at once. Not through dramatic moments. But one lesson. One conversation. One choice. At a time. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting transformation is built through consistent daily choices. Opening to a fresh page, they slowly wrote, "Today I choose courage again." They paused before continuing. Not because fear has disappeared, but because courage deserves a chance to speak. Reading those simple words filled them with unexpected peace. For years they believed courage meant never feeling afraid. Now they understood something different. Courage often means doing the right thing while your heart is still trembling. Because your heart needs this right now, because bravery isn't the absence of fear, it is choosing kindness despite it. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The towering oak tree still stretched confidently toward the blue sky. Its branches danced gently beneath the breeze. The peaceful lake reflected drifting clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children chased butterflies through colorful flowers. Everything invited stillness. They found the familiar wooden bench overlooking the water. Instead of searching for dramatic answers, they simply listened. The birds. The breeze. The gentle ripples across the lake. Silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt healing. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet moments often reveal truths that busy lives overlook. Nearby, an elderly couple quietly shared breakfast together. For several minutes neither of them spoke. Then the husband smiled gently. "Thank you." His wife looked surprised. "For what?" "For choosing me every ordinary day." She smiled. "I was going to say the same thing." No audience. No celebration. Just sincere appreciation. Watching them reminded the person that lasting relationships are rarely built by extraordinary events. They are built through ordinary faithfulness. Because your heart needs this right now, because appreciation keeps love alive. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the peaceful lake, they noticed an elderly carpenter repairing an old wooden bridge. Curious, they stopped. Wouldn't it be easier to replace it? They asked. The carpenter smiled warmly. It would. But strong foundations deserve restoration. Those words echoed inside. Relationships are often the same. Misunderstandings leave cracks. Silence creates distance. Fear weakens trust. Yet honesty, patience, compassion, and forgiveness can restore what once appeared broken. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing begins when people choose restoration instead of giving up. As the afternoon unfolded, they wandered into the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the warm sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower. Curious, they asked, "How do you know which flowers need extra care?" The gardener smiled. "I pay attention every day. If I only visited once in a while, I would miss the signs." Those words quietly settled into their heart. People are much the same. Sometimes they don't need perfect advice. Sometimes they simply need someone willing to notice that they're struggling. Because your heart needs this right now, because careful listening is one of the greatest gifts we can give another person. The afternoon breeze carried soft piano music through the park. Only a handful of visitors paused to listen. Still, every melody was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that meaningful things rarely seek attention. Integrity works quietly. Patience works quietly. Hope grows quietly. Forgiveness works quietly. Yet together they quietly shape lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness often leaves the deepest impact. Returning to the familiar wooden bench, they opened the notebook again. Today's page filled naturally. Today I realized something important. The big news was never meant to create fear. It was meant to inspire honesty. The greatest burden wasn't the truth. The greatest burden was carrying it alone. Honest conversations don't always solve every problem. But they often become the beginning of healing. Reading those words brought tears to their eyes. Not because everything had become easy, but because they finally understood that vulnerability isn't weakness. It is often the doorway to genuine connection. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust grows where honesty is welcomed. As afternoon slowly became evening, the golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families folded picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the calm water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate's big news will leave you in tears. Are you ready to hear it? A gentle smile crossed their face. The big news wasn't a shocking secret. It wasn't a prediction about the future. It wasn't a mysterious revelation. The real news was beautifully simple. A heart that had once hidden behind fear had finally chosen courage. A person who had delayed meaningful conversations had finally embraced honesty. A life once guided by hesitation had begun to move forward with compassion, gratitude, and hope. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest victories often happen quietly inside us. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will choose honesty over hesitation. Tomorrow I will appreciate people more freely. Tomorrow I will forgive more quickly. Tomorrow I will listen before assuming. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose words and actions reflect kindness, humility, compassion, and hope." They paused before writing one final reflection. "Today I discovered that the most meaningful news isn't something dramatic waiting somewhere in the future. It is the quiet realization that every ordinary day offers another opportunity to love more deeply, speak more honestly, forgive more generously, and appreciate the people around us while we still have the chance." Those simple choices become the strongest foundation for every lasting relationship. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would quietly appear. New lessons would patiently unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer feared what honesty might bring. Because they had discovered that the greatest news wasn't hidden in mystery. It was the quiet transformation taking place within their own heart. Several peaceful days had passed since that unforgettable conversation. Nothing around them seemed dramatically different. The sun still rose over the quiet neighborhood. Morning birds still welcomed the day with cheerful songs. The familiar bakery still filled the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children still laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors still waved as they tended colorful gardens. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet inside one heart, everything had quietly changed. The fear that had once whispered, "Keep everything inside," had grown weaker. In its place stood something stronger. Hope. Not the kind of hope built on fantasy, but the quiet confidence that comes from choosing honesty, kindness, and courage. Because your heart needs this right now, because lasting peace begins when we stop allowing fear to make our decisions. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. Steam rose gently from a warm cup of tea resting beside the window. Instead of rushing into another busy day, they simply watched the sunrise paint the sky with shades of gold, orange, and soft pink. A robin landed on the garden fence before flying toward the nearby oak tree. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. For the first time in a long while, they weren't thinking about what they should have said months ago. They were grateful for the chance to speak honestly today. Because your heart needs this right now, because every new day offers another opportunity to choose courage. After breakfast they reached once again for the old notebook that had become their quiet companion. Its worn cover reflected years of reflection. Inside were dreams, disappointments, unanswered questions, grateful prayers, joyful memories, and difficult lessons. Every page reminded them that growth had never happened all at once. It happened one conversation at a time. One apology at a time. One act of forgiveness at a time. One decision to keep moving forward. They smiled as they slowly turned another page. Because your heart needs this right now, because every difficult season can become part of a meaningful story. Opening to a fresh page, they carefully wrote, "Today I choose trust." For a moment they paused. Then they added, "Not because life is perfect, but because honesty deserves to be stronger than fear." Reading those words brought a quiet smile. For years they had believed trust appeared suddenly. Now they understood something much deeper. Trust grows slowly. It grows every time someone keeps a promise. Every time someone listens carefully. Every time someone chooses kindness instead of pride. Because your heart needs this right now, because trust is built through consistent actions, not dramatic moments. Later that morning they returned to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches stretched toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes moved softly through the leaves. The calm water reflected drifting white clouds like polished glass. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while feeding ducks along the shoreline. Everything invited them to slow down. Finding the familiar wooden bench, they quietly sat. This time they weren't searching for answers. They were simply appreciating the present. Because your heart needs this right now, because contentment often begins when we stop chasing certainty. Nearby, an elderly grandfather helped his granddaughter plant flower seeds in a small garden. The little girl looked puzzled. But nothing happened. The grandfather smiled. "Not yet." She frowned. "Then how do you know they'll grow?" He gently covered the seeds with soil. Because healthy things often grow quietly before anyone can see them. Those words settled deeply into their heart. Healing is often like planting seeds. Forgiveness grows quietly. Trust grows quietly. Patience grows quietly. Hope grows quietly. Just because we cannot immediately see the results doesn't mean nothing is happening. Because your heart needs this right now, because meaningful growth often begins beneath the surface. The morning slowly became afternoon. Walking beside the lake, they noticed a young artist painting the peaceful scenery. Curious, they stopped to admire the canvas. "It looks beautiful," they said. The artist smiled. "It didn't begin that way." "What do you mean?" "My first sketch was messy. I almost gave up. But every correction made the picture better." Those words quietly echoed inside. Relationships are often painted the same way. Misunderstandings teach patience. Honest conversations teach trust. Forgiveness restores beauty. Every lesson adds another meaningful brushstroke. Because your heart needs this right now, because mistakes can become part of something beautiful when we keep learning. Later they wandered through the community flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, and lavender stretched beneath the warm afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower before trimming a few branches. Curious, they asked, "Why trim healthy branches?" The gardener smiled. "So the plant can become even stronger." Those words lingered in their thoughts. Sometimes healthy growth requires letting go. Letting go of resentment. Letting go of unnecessary fear. Letting go of pride. Making room for understanding. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing often begins when we release what no longer helps us grow. The afternoon breeze carried soft guitar music through the park. Only a few people paused to listen. Still, every melody was played with remarkable care. Watching the musician reminded them that beautiful things rarely need loud attention. Integrity works quietly. Compassion works quietly. Patience works quietly. Hope works quietly. Yet together they quietly change lives. Because your heart needs this right now, because quiet goodness often leaves the deepest impact. Returning once again to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook. Today's page filled naturally. Today I realized something important. The big news wasn't a shocking secret. The greatest change happened inside my own heart. I learned that courage grows every time I choose honesty. I learned that love becomes stronger when appreciation is spoken aloud. I learned that forgiveness creates freedom. I learned that understanding begins with listening. Reading those words brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Because they finally understood that emotional strength isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about facing life with sincerity and compassion. Because your heart needs this right now, because true strength is found in authenticity. As afternoon slowly became evening, golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the water, they reflected once more on the title of this story. Your soulmate's big news will leave you in tears. Are you ready to hear it? A gentle smile crossed their face. The big news had never been about a hidden mystery. It wasn't a supernatural revelation. It wasn't a prediction of tomorrow. The real news was beautifully simple. A fearful heart had become a hopeful one. A silent heart had learned to speak with kindness. A hesitant heart had discovered the courage to love more openly. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest transformations often happen quietly within us. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt calm. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time before bed, they carefully wrote, "Tomorrow I will continue choosing honesty. Tomorrow I will continue expressing gratitude. Tomorrow I will continue listening before judging. Tomorrow I will continue forgiving with humility. Tomorrow I will continue becoming someone whose actions reflect kindness, patience, compassion, and hope." Then they paused before writing one final reflection. Today I learned that the greatest news is not something dramatic waiting in the future. It is the quiet realization that every ordinary day gives us another opportunity to love generously, forgive sincerely, encourage freely, and appreciate the people around us while we still can. Those everyday choices become the strongest foundation for a meaningful life and lasting relationships. They gently closed the notebook. Outside, the stars continued shining. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer feared what tomorrow might bring. Because they had discovered that the greatest news was never hidden in mystery. It was the quiet transformation of a heart learning to live with honesty, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, and hope. The final morning arrived wrapped in a peaceful silence unlike any that had come before. The first rays of sunlight slowly filtered through the curtains, covering the room with warm shades of gold. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, fresh rain, and the promise of a brand new day. Birds welcomed the sunrise with cheerful songs. Outside, the neighborhood awakened little by little. The familiar bakery unlocked its doors before dawn, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Children laughed as they hurried toward school. Neighbors smiled while watering colorful gardens. Everything appeared wonderfully ordinary. Yet inside one heart, everything had changed. Not because the world suddenly became perfect. Not because every question had been answered. But because fear no longer controlled the future. Hope had quietly taken its place. Because your heart needs this right now, because real peace begins when courage becomes stronger than fear. That morning they prepared breakfast slowly. There was no rushing. No anxious thoughts. Only gratitude. A warm cup of tea rested beside the window while soft morning light stretched across the wooden table. Instead of worrying about yesterday or trying to predict tomorrow, they simply appreciated the beauty surrounding them. A butterfly landed briefly on the windowsill. 2 sparrows gathered tiny branches to build a nest. A neighbor smiled at a stranger walking past. Simple moments. Small blessings. For years they believed happiness would arrive after life finally became certain. Now they understood something very different. Happiness often begins when we choose gratitude before certainty. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude transforms ordinary mornings into unforgettable memories. After breakfast they reached once more for the familiar notebook. Its worn cover reflected years of faithful use. Inside were dreams once written with excitement. Questions asked during lonely nights. Lessons learned through painful seasons. Moments of gratitude recorded after quiet victories. Turning each page felt like meeting every version of themselves. The fearful version. The impatient version. The discouraged version. The hopeful version. And finally, the peaceful version. They smiled gently. The notebook had never predicted the future. It had simply recorded the quiet transformation of one heart learning to choose honesty over fear. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest journeys happen within the human heart. Only one blank page remained. They rested the pen gently against the paper. For several quiet moments they simply listened to the birds singing outside. Then they slowly began writing. Today I finally understand the big news. It wasn't about a dramatic surprise. It wasn't about a hidden mystery. It wasn't about predicting tomorrow. It was about discovering who I have become. The greatest miracle wasn't something happening around me. It was the quiet change happening inside me. Reading those words filled their eyes with tears. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Because your heart needs this right now, because gratitude often appears when we recognize how much we have grown. Later that morning they returned one final time to the familiar park. The old oak tree still stood proudly beside the peaceful lake. Its branches stretched confidently toward the bright blue sky. Gentle breezes danced through the leaves. Sunlight shimmered across the calm water. Families gathered beneath shady trees. Children laughed while feeding ducks. Everything invited quiet reflection. Finding the familiar wooden bench overlooking the lake, they quietly sat. This time they weren't searching for answers. They simply enjoyed the stillness. Because your heart needs this right now, because contentment often begins when we stop chasing certainty and begin embracing today. Nearby, an elderly craftsman carefully restored an old wooden bench that had weathered many seasons. A curious child watched with fascination. "Why don't you buy a new one?" the child asked. The craftsman smiled warmly. "Because something that's been loved deserves another chance. It may have scratches. It may carry signs of time. But it still has value." Those simple words settled deeply into their heart. People are often like that bench. Relationships are often like that bench. Life leaves marks. Mistakes leave scars. Time creates challenges. Yet patience, honesty, forgiveness, compassion, and understanding can restore what once seemed impossible to repair. Because your heart needs this right now, because healing begins when people choose restoration instead of resentment. The afternoon quietly unfolded. Golden sunlight reflected across the peaceful lake. A father patiently helped his daughter learn to ride her bicycle. Each time she lost balance, she stood back up smiling. Her father never criticized her. Instead he gently said, "You didn't fail. You learned." She laughed and tried again. Watching them reminded the person that healthy relationships are places where people are encouraged to grow, not punished for every mistake. Because your heart needs this right now, because encouragement often changes lives more than criticism ever can. Later they wandered through the flower garden. Rows of roses, lilies, daisies, lavender, and sunflowers bloomed beneath the afternoon sunshine. An elderly gardener carefully watered every flower before gently removing a few dry leaves. Curious, they asked, "Do flowers all bloom together?" The gardener smiled kindly. "No. Every flower blooms in its own season. But every flower deserves patience." Those simple words quietly settled into their heart. People also grow differently. Some heal quickly. Others slowly. Some forgive easily. Others need reassurance. Love makes room for every journey. Because your heart needs this right now, because understanding grows wherever patience is practiced. Returning one final time to the familiar bench, they opened the notebook to its last page. Slowly they wrote. Today I release fear. I release unnecessary worry. I release hesitation. I release the belief that tomorrow is guaranteed. Instead, I choose honesty. I choose gratitude. I choose forgiveness. I choose compassion. I choose humility. I choose hope. Reading those words brought a peace unlike anything they had known before. They realized the greatest burden had never been uncertainty. The greatest burden had been believing they needed perfect timing before choosing kindness. Because your heart needs this right now, because kindness is always the right choice, even when life feels uncertain. As afternoon slowly became evening, the sunset painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange, pink, purple, and gold. Families packed picnic blankets. Children waved goodbye to new friends. Birds returned to their nests. Everything gradually became still. Standing beside the peaceful lake, they reflected one final time on the title of this story. Your soulmate's big news will leave you in tears. Are you ready to hear it? A gentle smile crossed their face. The big news had never been about a shocking revelation. It had never been about predicting the future. It had never been about hidden mysteries. The real news was beautifully simple. A fearful heart had become a hopeful one. A hesitant heart had learned to speak with honesty. A grateful heart had discovered the courage to appreciate others before it was too late. And that quiet transformation changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest victories often happen where no one else can see them, inside the heart. That evening they returned home beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The room felt peaceful. The notebook rested quietly on the table. Opening it one final time, they carefully wrote. If this journey has taught me anything, it is this. Never wait for perfect timing to express kindness. Never assume people already know they matter. Tell them. Never allow fear to become louder than love. Never underestimate the healing power of one honest conversation. Never believe forgiveness is weakness. It is often the beginning of freedom. They paused before writing one final reflection. Tomorrow remains unwritten, but I no longer fear it. Whether life brings joyful celebrations, difficult conversations, unexpected opportunities, or quiet ordinary mornings, I choose to meet every day with honesty, gratitude, humility, patience, compassion, and hope. Those values may not remove every challenge, but they will guide every decision and help build relationships rooted in trust, respect, and genuine love. They gently closed the notebook. The journey had reached its final page. Outside, countless stars shimmered across the peaceful night sky. Tomorrow remained unwritten. New conversations would begin. New opportunities would appear. New lessons would quietly unfold. And for the first time in many years, they no longer waited for dramatic news to change their life. Because they had discovered the greatest truth of all. The most meaningful news is not found in mysterious predictions or extraordinary events. It is found in the quiet decision to live each day with honesty, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, humility, and hope. Those simple choices become the strongest foundation for every meaningful relationship and every peaceful heart. The room became still. The stars filled the night sky. With a gentle smile, they turned off the light, ready to welcome tomorrow, not with fear, but with wisdom, kindness, courage, and love.